Let's talk about shared preference. And first question we might ask, what is a shared preference? Shared preference is a key value store. What does it mean? Like we have a key and we want to store a certain value at that key. You can consider it as a hash map. And if you don't know what hash map, it's just a key value pairs. You have a key and that key refers to certain value. So you can view it as a hash map, and it's relatively small, like you really want to store a very small value. That comes up with the properties of shared preference. It has a couple of properties, but it doesn't really disallow you from using it to store large values, but it should store small values because it works on the UI threads. And when it works on UI thread, you need to be very careful when working with on UI thread, because UI thread is really important, and if it's blocked, it will probably result in an application non-responsive dialog, which will eventually close the app and provide bad user experience. It also, for the shared preference, it can have default values for certain keys. Like you can define, you can search for a certain key, and if you don't find the value for that key, you can have a default value. Some bad use case for shared preference, like I said, it must be used for a small, relatively cheap value because it works on UI thread. So one bad example is storing a base 64 image in a form of string format. That's gonna take a lot of effort to convert an image to base 64 just in order to store it in a shared preference. That's probably not the best solution you will probably want. If you want to visualize how a shared preference can look like in an app, that's just because it's too heavy and will block the UI. For the visualization, you can consider it like this way. We have our app, which is the blue section. Like, since Android is a multi-Linux user-based operating system, so apps really work simultaneously together. So you have your own app with your own key value shared preference, and there are other apps which are colored by green, and they have their own shared preference like yellow shared preference. You don't have access to their shared preference unless there's some way of communication that they allow. But usually shared preference is stored for your app, like your own use. So some examples of key value, like you can name your key like app launched in millisecond, and you can store long value, or you can store a string, or you can store integer, you can store a boolean, you can store primitive types. So that's probably just a brief about shared preference and how can you think of it. It's relatively simple, and this is what we're gonna use in order to save his first time for the user to open the app, or if he has opened the app a couple of times before, and so on. This is the beginning of a shared preference, and it will be used in our data layer. So this is really nice, and I hope you can learn something new when working with shared preference.